taking a quick break from the car to let my chickens out, and we're going to talk about land sales. So essentially, when you are trying to buy land, you have a couple of different options, and some of those options include being able to purchase just raw land, being able to purchase land with a fixture already on it, and we're talking acreage typically, not typically smaller parcels. We have friends today. Hold on. Our friends have decided to join us as they are like following me around wanting their food. But back to our regularly scheduled program at this point. So if you are trying to purchase land and you are looking at acreage, or even if you're looking at something that's not a bunch of acreage, but that still has some kind of fixture on it, whether it be a house or a mobile home, you know, all these different things that you can come across. A lot of times you can't just buy that property just for the price of the land. Even if it doesn't have like a substantial structure that's worth even paying any money for, you can't just say, oh, I want the land, but I'm really not worried about the structure. We're going to get rid of it. Sometimes you can. There are special instances. There are special lenders that will allow that. But like from a traditional lending standpoint, that's not typically what you can do. Typically, you know, they have to be able to appraise that with it, or you have to purchase it in cash if that's the case. Now, this particular client that I'm working with right now, they are not a cash buyer. They need lending options. So there are some local banks that you can work with that will kind of overlook the fact that there is some kind of structure on the property if it's a total tear down. And we are trying to figure out exactly what loan options they have, because they're going to tear it down. Even if they could fix the property, they're not going to. They're not going to fix the house because it is 100% just not worth it. So when you're looking at typical land sales, you have some banks that will loan on land only, and then you have some that want to know what you're going to put there and will do like a construction loan with it, but they will not loan only on the land. So you do have to know which lender to go to be able to even attempt getting that financing. Now, as far as if there's a structure on it, they want to know, what is it going to take to get that structure out of there? Because they need to account for that. If you don't plan to immediately build on it or put something else there, then we're going to have to look at a different type of lender who can look at the land and say, okay, yeah, that's definitely a tear down, and we're only going to consider the loan for the property itself. There are a couple around me, because we're in a little bit more of a rural area where this property is. There's a couple around me, banks that will do just like the land and kind of overlook the property with the structure. But then there's also some that won't. They want to know what you're going to put there. So rule of thumb is, if you are looking at land and your pricing, typically it's priced out per acre. Like, what's the price point per acre? Is it $2,000 per acre? Is it $10,000 per acre? You want to look at your offer to be whatever the general per acreage is, based off the acreage's type and usability, which we'll go into that in just a second. But basically, you want to find out, are you going to put something on there, or are you just buying it for the raw land? And then that will depict what type of lender we need to go with and what type of loan options you have. Now, pricing out land is a tricky situation sometimes, because you could have 10 beautiful acres, but only half of it can be used. Because in our particular area down in Georgia on the coast, we have a lot of wetlands. We don't have a whole bunch of high and dry that's usually one parcel. Typically, we have a lot of wetlands, and it's sprinkled either throughout the property or a large portion of the property is wetlands, and that's protected. You can't use it. Every so often you can get a variance, and you can pay a lot of money for that variance. And most people, that's not what they want to do. Most people, they want to buy a piece of property, say 5 acres, 3 of it is buildable, 2 of it is not. They'll just say, well, we at least have the other 2, but having the 3 that's buildable is sufficient for us. But then for somebody like my client who wants to do multiple homes and rezone and utilize as much of the property as possible, they pretty much need all 10 acres to be buildable. They don't really want anything with wetlands, which can be kind of hard to find over here. So if you have wetlands land, if you have high and dry land, if you have potential flooding issues in part of the land, they hold different value weights. You're not going to look at say 3 acres of a 10-acre plot and say that those 3 acres are worth the same as the other 7, because those 3 acres are not high and dry. They are wetlands, whereas 7 are high and dry. So you do have to factor that in. So if you're looking for property and that hasn't been explained to you, that is something to consider, is that it may look like price per acre is less, but what they're really doing is saying, okay, we priced out the wetlands at, for easy numbers, $2,000 an acre. And then you have 3 acres that are wetlands. So that is $6,000 for those 3 acres. And then we priced out the high and dry 7 for, let's say, $4,000 an acre. Okay, so then you factor all that in, and they usually, when you're seeing it, when your agent is seeing it on the MLS and trying to factor what they paid per acre, you're actually looking at an average between adding together what they paid for the wetlands, what they paid for the high and dry, and then you're adding those two together. That gets you the whole, and then you're dividing that whole by the total number of acres, which would have been 10. So it's actually averaging it out. You're not actually getting exactly the dollar amount that you paid per acre, depending the type of acreage. So it's a lot. I know that's a lot to think about, but just remember, if it's not usable land, it's not as valuable. So therefore, you will see a huge variance in big, small, large, smaller acreage plots versus larger acreage plots. You'll see a huge variance in price per acre because of that reason. And you need somebody who can actually go in, pull those wetland maps, and get a good idea of how much percentage of that property is usable. If the property is incredibly high on that spectrum and you have a high percentage of usability for that property, then it's going to be worth more than a property that's the exact same size that has a lesser percentage of usable space. So these are just a few things to consider if you're looking into buying land or looking into building, or what kind of lending that takes, or how this process works. My name is Morgan Rountree with Morgan Rountree Realty. I work all up and down the Georgia East Coast, from the South Carolina border all the way down to the Florida border. And I'd be more than happy to go through this with you, because it is a little detailed, and it's a little bit difficult. It's not your typical run-of-the-mill running comps. And so I like to be able to try and explain it to people, because most people have a lot of questions. So if you have any questions, phone number, email, web address, all of that is linked here. Please don't hesitate to reach out. I'd be more than happy to go through it with you and see what options you may have.